Hi students, I'm going to make another version of this wheel because there's some confusion about it and some struggling with it. And I know we don't have compasses, but cheap compasses are very frustrating and difficult to use, and you end up with a hole, and you also end up with swinging weird circles. So unless you want to buy invest in a decent compass, this is the way to go. In the class, we just pass around a template. It takes 5 minutes. Or we just use a compass. So in this case, we're kind of winging it, but we also want it to look good. So the circles need to be varied in size, and they also need to be along a general circle. So the lines are the way to get everything even. A lot of students have circles too close together, too spread out, too small. They're not going off the edge, so they're all crumped in the middle. This should go off the edge and crop them in half on the two sides. But anyway, I'm going to try to redo this to make it a little bit more manageable. And just some pointers for shortcuts. So I have measured out here 10 inches, and you have to put a dot and then go up here again and put a dot before you connect it. Otherwise, this is converging, and then it doesn't work out. The other thing is, remember when you post to take a picture outside, flat, in daylight but in the shade. Otherwise you're going to have a picture that's brown or gray when you post it. And a good rule of thumb is never try to take a picture in your room, and make sure it's not leaning. Basically just look at that tutorial on how to shoot your work, and then of course how to embed your work. Since I'm not going to be looking at files anymore, I'm finding the center point here, 7.5 this way. And this is a mess paper. You're supposed to use this as a messy first draft. This is going to be later transferred onto a project. So this is just to get the circles correct. You also have no limit to how much you can redo this. The post is not the project. The post is weekly check-ins on what you're doing for feedback. And the quality of your post, even if your picture is not correct in terms of the project, is about you communicating, just going through the posting motions, commenting on other people's work. That way you get the points for the post. I'm not grading this yet. It does affect the quality of the post if it's really off. But mostly it's how you crop it, post it, and use that mount and embed button. So you see what I just did. I just divided this right down the middle. So it's 10 and 15. I'm just checking that that's still going. So this is something I want you to do first. Find the center point. And this is for those who want to redo their wheel, tweak it, make it better. We all want to be complete before we get to that project. So double check that this is right in the middle for 5 across, and that this is right in the middle for 7.5 down. It's pretty close. So from there, just knowing you have that is going to guarantee that your circles are not cascading up or down or to the sides. Find a round object that you can center. Even though you don't have to stick with it completely, you're going to be using it to ground those elements. Now if you want to be really exact, just measure, what is this? This is 2.5, this is 2.5, this is to the edge, this is to the edge. So basically I have just completely centered this without even having to do anything other than measure top and bottom. By doing this, you're now guaranteeing yourself that things are going to be even. You can do as many circles as you want on here just to keep yourself on track. So it's good to have things you can see through like that. See how I got off? It's off. So I can redo it. And if you need to erase, go ahead. I'm not an erase kind of person. I just keep making it darker or different color or whatever. So now I kind of have a sense. Now to get these lines properly, you have to use these measurements because otherwise the wheel doesn't match. If you just try to put it to the corners, it doesn't line up because these are rectangles, not squares, and this is a circle within a rectangle. So, okay, so this part we already have. Boom, boom. This is the part that's a little tricky. This part you only go in 3/4 of an inch and put a dot. 3/4 of an inch, put a dot. Up here, 3/4 of an inch, put a dot. Of course, it's better to stand because then you can see what you're doing. Whenever you're measuring, it's good to stand. Now, because I don't have something long enough to get here, I can just do part of it at a time and then go the rest of the way. This is important because this is going to give you the even circles. Those are the complicated ones. The side ones are much easier. Side ones you just split in half. So now that we've split 15 into 7.5, we just go down 3 3/4. If you're uncomfortable with rulers, just make a mark like that and then just drag it down and do it again here. And of course we do it here, here, and then we're going to connect these. I don't quite reach here, so I'm going to go through the middle. This will be good because it'll be a nice fresh video instead of an older one on there. Four and a half. Now I just messed up, which is good for you to see, actually. This is where you got to catch yourself. These, I could see here, see how these are closer together and those are further apart? This is where you want to fix it. See, notice this, see how wide that is and then narrow? That's what happened on a lot of student wheels. And it just happened to me. So don't feel bad about it. I'm going to now change this to the measurement that I have in the instructions. That's why it's so important to watch these instructions. I'm going to put it big so you can see. 4.5. I caught myself because I could see how weird it was. It was like getting really weird. So just keep your mind out for these things because I knew now that this is the one based on a weird distortion that I saw there. And I will switch to a different color now so it makes sense because I don't have an eraser. But I'm just going to smear these out because I messed those up. You can see how those are wrong. This is why this is a scratch paper. You want to really be gentle with yourself if you mess up. You don't even have to redo, you just have to keep erasing or changing. All right, so this is, now I know what I'm doing. See, now it actually makes sense. I'm going to do it really dark so you can see where I messed up. See how I messed up a little? Makes all the difference. So now we have 4.5. And that just means that basically I just didn't listen to my own instructions. I just kind of made an assumption about splitting it. So it is challenging to do 3 1/4, 3/4 here, 3/4 here. If I can not make a mess, I'll be able to post this better. 3/4 of an inch, 4.5 of an inch. This is the middle. The middle. This is 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then we have the 4.5. So basically, this is not even. So at this point, you want to just go like this. Make all your dots very, very visible so it's not confusing. I'm going to connect these now. See how much better it looks already. It's even. And it did help to have that bowl on the top. So I'm going to do this now with a marker just so you can see because I kind of made a smeary. Okay, the blue is going to be the correct. The reason this is so tricky is that this is a 12-point wheel, which is the most commonly used wheel in all art mediums. And it's a little harder to organize than a 10-point wheel, which is another kind of wheel less common, and it has fewer hues on it. But the reason this is hard is we got to get 12 circles on it. That's what I was saying, like if you need to switch to a marker or whatever you need to do to keep yourself organized, I'm going to grab another marker because I don't want to distract myself with that mistake that I made. So what I'm trying to say is at any time when your wheel doesn't look good or doesn't have what you want it to have, then you can always redo it. You can always fix this. And just because you don't post it in time the way you want it, you're still going to get credit for posting. Posting is something you're going to do every week. The final versions of things are going to happen when we have group critiques. We're going to critique those stages. That's when your actual project or your warm-up for that project are going to be graded. So that's either going to be thumbnails before project critique or the project itself. So it doesn't mean you don't want to try to get it right by the post deadline, but it also means that if you don't, not the end of the world. I'm kind of glad I messed up there because I think that's pretty much something that can, something that can happen. You can see how I'm really making sure I'm using the correct ones now by switching to orange. This is just a top sheet. All of our work is going to be on scratch paper to work everything out and then ultimately transfer with this super cool carbon paper that we use, because the idea is to have no pencil marks at all on your projects anywhere. No pencil marks on the surface, only paint and that faint little carbon line. So here's what I wanted to show you about the actual 12 points, because a lot of you are posting it sideways. Sometimes a lot of my students have posted sideways, or the actual circles are not the right size. We want to make sure there's 3 sizes. So I want to make sure you're using enough round objects around the house that are big enough. The middle doesn't need to be that big, but I'll deal with that in a minute. First thing you want to do is figure out what the top is. I started making this video vertically, even though it's easier to see sideways, because I want to make sure you know how to post this and what this is. This is the top of the wheel. The top of the wheel, put a little arrow up there, is going to be where one of your biggest circles is. I found this cup thing in the kitchen, and I'm going to use it to make a circle. I don't need it that big, so I'm using the other side. When you want to center this, keep in mind that this one, the one below the left, and the one below the right on the wheel, that's the triangle. So you can make a little triangle to help yourself remember that those 3 are all the same size. So I'm going to use this, this, and this on this one. Another thing that helps is before you even start, put a dot on every single area where this hits this big circle. The problem is a lot of times people put the circles in or out, and really it's here. The other thing is these are supposed to go off the edge. They're supposed to. And a lot of times students will try to cram them in somewhere in here just because they think it's not supposed to, but they definitely are supposed to go off the edge. So look, now I have my 12 dots. Now on the top one, and you got to center it as best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you definitely want them all as centered as possible. That's going to be the top of the wheel. If it helps, it's actually where yellow is going to be. Yellow is always at the top of a correct wheel. You don't always see that, but that's really what it's supposed to be, because it's the lightest hue on the wheel. So this is the triangle that I'm doing, just so I remember this is where I put my big ones. Some of you are going to need to go back and make your wheels, your circles bigger. They need to be able to hold paint. They can't just be tiny little ones, especially because we're going to get smaller as we go. So see how I'm going right off the edge? That's fine. Don't try to fit it in. See how it's cropped? It's cropped. That's fine. That's totally fine. So now we're done with the 3. The next ones we're going to do are every other. So it's another triangle. It's called a secondary triad. So it makes a 6-pointed star. Double that and you get your 12 hues. So on these 3, I'm going to use a slightly smaller circle. That's the same, so I'm going to use this one. And like you will observe, it's hard to center these. But as long as you're sticking with that original big circle, you'll get it close, because we're going to be able to clean these up later. The main thing is just the placement along that perimeter and not going in and out and in and out on the lines. 1, 2, 3. So we'll be able to make adjustments to this later. I just want to get the size and the placement on here. So now I have 6. Now the rest of them are going to be smaller. They may be wobbly, of course. It's very difficult to gauge the center point on these, but see how this goes off the edge? We want it to go off the edge, just like this. It'll end right there. All we need is a little blip of it. Crop right there. And then we have 2 more. It's a little bit crooked. But when we actually get to the project, we'll be able to clean this up and really get it nice. I think I'll make this one slightly smaller. I think it's a little bit too big for me in the middle. I don't want a huge big blob of color. So that's the middle. Whoop, a little bit off, so you can just kind of adjust it. See what I mean, how erasing is unnecessary? Smudges are natural. The main thing is you have a different color so that you can pick the one you want. Whoops. So even if your post doesn't come out exactly as you want it, the whole idea of posting is to get feedback, communicate with others, and then go about trying to make the changes. You've got plenty of time to make the changes. But the thing that I want to really watch out for, that always happens the first couple weeks, is students whose files don't load, students who don't embed properly. I only am going to use the mountain and the moon. The first week I give a lot of leeway, but after that, you have to have your picture visible in the post all the time. So if you're embedding with the paperclip, that's not correct. So I always say review the embed instructions page. And another very important thing is when you take a picture of this, it has to be outside, either on a wall, on the floor, with your camera completely flush. You can't have concave or distorted. And then you have to crop it in some kind of a program. It can't just be random. So don't ever take a picture indoors. And make sure you use that mountain embed. But look how you can see now on here how everything falls on this. And just any kind of concentric circle, even if it's not the perfect size, a plate, a bowl, a lamp top, whatever it is, even if at least it gives you a guide. Some people even use a string around a pencil. But whatever you need to do, just keep everything on here so that nothing's in and out and in and out. And make sure you have big three, medium 3, and then the rest a bit smaller and the medium in the middle. So 3/4, 3/4, 4.5, 4.5, 3/4, and the main thing is split it like that first, put a dot, and put something round. And then just totally make sure for the next post, and for all posts this semester, to know how to post. Hopefully that helps a lot.